For a lot of players, finding a comfortable pair of football boots can feel like a challenge. And one of the biggest reasons for that is that most boots on the market today tend to run pretty narrow, especially in the toe box. But thankfully, there are some great options you can find that are going to offer a slightly wider fit. So in this video, we're going to highlight the widest football boots on offer from each of the biggest brands in 2024. And after the video, if you're interested in picking up a pair of any of the boots that we discuss, I'll leave links below in the description where you can find them on sale at a discount. So to kick things off, we're going over to Nike for the first boot on our list, and that's going to be the Premier 3. Now, to be honest, Nike as a company do not really sell a ton of wide-fitting football boots, and that's one of the reasons why I don't have a ton of their models on this list. But if I were to pick one boot from the Nike lineup that is going to be a little bit more comfortable towards the front of the boot, I would definitely pick the Premiers. Now, as of today, the Premier 3 is actually going to be the only leather offering that's in Nike's entire lineup. It features this extremely soft K leather that starts in the toe box and is going to wrap all the way around the sides of the boot. Aesthetically, it also happens to be one of my favorite boots that Nike makes. I really like this platinum and white colorway that I have here. It does ship with a retro fold-over tongue that I opted to remove just because I think it makes the boots look a little bit more modern. But obviously, I think the best thing about these boots are the fit. They don't taper quite as aggressively as some other top-end models from Nike, and so that means that there's going to be a little bit more room towards the front of the boot. And of course, because the front of these boots are made of that kangaroo leather upper, they're going to stretch a little bit more, and you're going to get a little bit more volume in the boots over time. In fact, when I first got these boots in my standard size 10.5 US, my toes went all the way to the end of the boot, but after playing in them for about 3 months, I definitely broke them in a little bit and got some more wiggle room for my toes. And to top things off, compared to top-end Nike models that retail for around $240 to $270, you can actually pick up a pair of the Nike Premier 3 for about $100. Next up from Nike, we have another classic, and that's going to be the Tiempo Legend 10. Now, of Nike's 3 flagship models being the Tiempo, the Phantom, and the Mercurial, I would definitely say that the Tiempo is the widest of those 3. While the toe box is only going to be about a standard width, this boot comes with a really stellar knit inner liner that makes it one of the most comfortable boots that they offer, and honestly, one of the more comfortable boots on the market, period. Because that inner liner is so elasticated, it just has a really great stretch to it, so it's very accommodating through the midfoot. Now, the Legend 10 isn't made out of a leather material for the first time in its history. Instead, Nike decided to pivot towards a synthetic, but for those that are concerned about that, honestly, the synthetic leather that they made is pretty good. It's got a really soft touch to it, and actually, if you zoom in and look at the upper close enough, it even has that grainy pattern that mimics what real leather looks like. Now, obviously, since it's a synthetic material, it's not going to have quite as much stretch as natural leather, but for some people, that could even be a positive, and thankfully, these boots aren't too snug towards the front of the toe box to the point where they're going to be crushing your toes. You can get a couple different variations of the new Tiempo. My personal favorite is the Emerald model that released recently, just because I think aesthetically it looks amazing, and I love the diamond crosshatch pattern that you get throughout the upper. And I would personally recommend checking out the Pro version of the Tiempo because it's going to retail for around $130 to $140, but having seen both the Pro and the Elite version, you're essentially getting the same football boot for $100 cheaper. So I think that Pro model is going to hit the sweet spot in terms of value. And then just to throw in a couple honorable mentions from Nike, as I mentioned, I don't really feel that the Elite versions of the Phantom GX2 or the Vapor are going to be that wide. However, the takedown models, especially the 3rd and 4th tier takedowns, are actually going to be surprisingly a little bit more accommodating. So that means if you take a look at the Vapor 15 Academy or Club or the Phantom GX2 Academy or Club, they're going to have a centralized lacing system that has an open design and a standalone tongue instead of that one-piece knit upper design. And essentially, when you get that traditional lacing system with that standalone tongue, it's just going to allow for a lot more adjustability throughout the midfoot, and for some players with slightly wider feet, these 3rd and 4th tier takedowns might actually be a little bit more comfortable for you. And over the past few years, I've especially been a big fan of the Vapor Academy series. Last year, when I tried on the Vapor 15 Academy, I think it was one of the best $80 boots I'd ever tried on, and now you can get the Vapor 16 Academy. I'm sure that that model is also going to be amazing. And as I mentioned, for a price of around $80, it's going to be hard to find other boots that can compete. All right, next up, we're going over to Puma with the Future 7. Now, Puma is another brand that's not really known for making the widest football boots, but one exception I would make is for the Future series. Now, the Future also has a special place in my heart because it was the first model to really introduce and popularize the idea of a full knit upper football boot. It's essentially a sock boot. Now, not all players are going to like the freedom and flexibility that you get from an upper that's going to be that stretchy. It's definitely more of a love or hate it type feel, but one benefit that you do get from an upper like that is that it is so flexible, it has so much stretch to it that it is going to pretty much accommodate almost any volume of foot that you put into it. Similar to the first level takedowns from Nike, if you get the Puma Future 7 Pro, you're going to get pretty much all the features of the more expensive version for $100 less. So if you've never tried on a football boot that has this full knit upper design, I would definitely recommend checking out the Future 7 to see if it might be a feeling that you're into. All right, next up, we're going to Adidas, starting with the Copa Gloro 2. Now, this boot is in many ways similar to the Nike Premier 3, and it's going to be the entry-level leather football boot offering from Adidas. And at a retail price of $100, it's going to be cheaper than almost any of the top-end models that they have to offer. And for that price tag of $100, you're going to get a really simple design, but one that also has a lot of these cool retro aesthetic elements like this fold-over tongue and the elasticated strap that goes all the way around the boot. And funny enough, it's actually this football boot that reminds me more of a throwback to those classic Predators than the new Predator Elite that came out recently. And also, if you do happen to have wider feet, the Gloro 2s are definitely going to offer you a little bit more space in the toe box compared to the new Predators. They're also going to offer more width than the new Copa Pure 2, which is the other high-profile leather offering from Adidas. Now, the only thing that I don't like about the Copa Pure 2 is that it has a pretty narrow sole plate at the bottom of that boot that makes the whole silhouette feel pretty snug overall. And of course, with that soft leather that you get through the toe box of the Copa Gloro 2, they are going to stretch a little bit over time and as you start to break them in. And of course, we can't bring up the Copa Gloro without talking about its older brother, the Copa Mundial. Now, I've made a lot of memories with these boots. As you can see, if you look towards the side of the boots, I've actually worn these a lot over the past 3 years. And I think these are definitely going to offer a few key improvements over the Copa Gloro. For example, the leather upper is going to be made of kangaroo leather, and it is going to be a little bit softer and feel a bit more premium. And the leather upper itself is also going to be a bit thinner, so it's going to give you a slightly closer touch on the ball. Now, the Copa Mundials don't have a particularly wide sole plate, especially towards the top, but because the upper stretches so much over time, you are going to have plenty of space if you have slightly wider feet. They do come in for a bit of a premium of about $160, but if you want more of an old school vibe, the Copa Mundials are definitely one to look out for. Now, transitioning from old school Adidas to new school Adidas, we have the F50. And we're talking about both the standard variation and the messy variation that I have here. Now, the F50 is one of the lightest and most minimal boots that Adidas offers, but I also actually think it's one of their most comfortable. And I think one of the reasons I was such a big fan of this new design is that Adidas actually stepped away from that knit collar design and went to a more open, traditional lacing system. This makes the boots just a lot easier to slip on and off, and it gives you much more adjustability throughout the ankle and the midfoot. Now, whether you choose to go with the standard variation or the messy version, they're both really comfortable. There's just a couple differences you need to note. The upper on the standard version is going to be a little bit thinner and slightly more rigid, while the Hybrid Touch upper that's used on the messy version that I have here is going to be slightly thicker, but it's definitely going to be a lot softer. And for that reason, I actually slightly prefer the messy version just because it almost gives me the sensation of that synthetic leather. And then with the messy version, you're also going to have this burrito style tongue that's attached at one end and then open on the other that's going to allow for a slightly wider opening. And I have to say that maybe the best thing about the new F50 release are the takedowns. Literally all of the takedowns have been amazing that I've tried on so far. So whether you go for the Elite version that's the most expensive, the Pro version that's around $150, or the League version that's about $90, they're all amazing football boots. It's really hard to pick my favorite football boot under $100, but I think the F50 League would be my pick. Next up, we got the Under Armour Magnetico Pro. Now, a lot of you may have never tried on a football boot from Under Armour, and honestly, I don't blame you. It's not really what they're known for, and a lot of their boots can be hit or miss. But in my opinion, the Magnetico series, up to this point at least, has been a success. I tried on the Pro version a few months ago, and I was really impressed with the clone upper that Under Armour used throughout the boot. It's got this cool quilted pattern that's really soft to the touch, and there's definitely enough room in the boots for players with wide feet. I did think that the heel area felt a little bit cheap on the Pro versions that retailed for around $130, so if you are looking for something a little bit more premium, I would recommend checking out the Elite elite versions, which you can usually find on sale for just under 200 bucks. But I'm definitely going to keep my eye on Under Armour, and I'll probably try the Magnetico 4 when it's released. Next up, we're going over to Japan to talk about one of my favorite football boots on the market right now, and that's the Adler Horenzo. Now, Adler is one of the smallest companies on this list, and I only heard about them for the first time last year. They've got 4 core models to choose from. Their main focus is going to be leather football boots, and the one that I went with was the Horenzo because it was advertised as their thinnest and lightest speed boot. And honestly, when I first got these in the mail, I was pretty blown away with the quality. For a total of $160, the craftsmanship of these boots and how well they fit was on par with $300 made in Japan Mizunos. I mean, the sole plate on these Adlers is not only glued, but it's also sewn around the perimeter, which is a really nice feature that you're not going to see on any other boot in this list. And as I mentioned, the fit is just amazing straight out of the box. The leather is so premium, yet also so thin that it still gives you a barefoot feel while also having that natural touch on the ball that you can only really get with leather. And as you can see towards the top of the boots, you're actually going to get plenty of volume that will definitely accommodate most foot shapes. And just to put things in perspective, these have been my main go-to boots for the past, I'd say 6 months. And while they are starting to get a little bit discolored, obviously, there really is pretty much no issue with the durability towards the sole of these boots. I mean, I see literally 0 sole separation whatsoever. And that's pretty impressive because usually around the 6-month mark with regular use, you can see boots start to fall apart if they're not well made. Only important thing to note about the Adlers is that they do run extremely long when it comes to sizing, so if you are interested in picking up a pair, you definitely want to go a full size down. Other than that, an absolutely amazing football boot. Next up, we got another company from Japan you may be more familiar with, and that's Mizuno, starting with the Morelia Neo 4 Beta. Now honestly, pretty much any boot from the Morelia line is guaranteed to be extremely comfortable, and the Neo 4 Beta is no exception. With these boots, you're going to get a really soft kangaroo leather toe box that fits great straight out of the box. And what I like about the Neo 4 Beta is that it's actually a great blend of both retro and modern elements. On the sides of the boot, you're actually going to have an extremely thin synthetic material that transitions very subtly to that leather in the toe box. And then you're actually going to have a stretchy knit material that runs throughout the collar and under that lacing system. And these 3 different materials are just integrated so well and so seamlessly throughout the boot. Now, in terms of pricing, the made in Japan version of the Neo 4 Beta is going to run you close to $300. I think right now it's around $280. However, Mizuno does sell this boot in an elite version, and to my knowledge, the elite version has almost the exact same features as the made in Japan. I could hardly tell a difference when holding the other boots in my hand, and you can pick up the elite versions for just $160. So unless you're ready to ball out and get the made in Japans, which are amazing, I'd personally probably recommend saving $100 and just going for the elites. And if you're looking for the thinnest, lightest, and one of the most aggressive boots that Mizuno offers, the Neo 4 Beta is definitely the place to start. But if you're looking for something a little bit more simple, a little bit more traditional, I'd probably push you towards the Mizuno Morelia 2. Now, unlike the Neo 4 Beta, the Morelia 2 here is going to have a full leather upper. And to me, one of the best ways I can describe the Morelia 2 is that it's a slightly more premium version of the Premier 3 from Nike. The leather is just going to be a little bit more soft and plush, and the build quality is going to be definitely to a slightly higher standard. Now, compared to the Neo 4 Beta, the Morelia 2 is going to give you a slightly more relaxed fit, in part due to this traditional lacing system. Also, the sole plate is going to be a little bit more flexible in the midfoot compared to the Neo 4 Beta, and I actually like having a bit more flexibility there. And definitely, if you have wider feet, these are going to be a solid option for you because that leather is definitely going to stretch a bit over time towards the toe box. Then, similar to the Neo 4 Beta, you can find the made in Japan version of the Morelia 2 for around $270, but if you want to save some money, you can get the elite version like I did for closer to $150. Now, finally, with the last brand in our list, I guess you could say we've saved the Widest for last, but it's going to be New Balance with the 442 V2 Pro. Now, of all of the different brands that we mentioned on this list, New Balance is the only one that consistently actually offers wide variations to their standard football boots. Now, those wide variations for the New Balance models aren't actually going to have a wider sole plate. Instead, they're just going to have more material throughout the upper, and that's going to give the fit a little bit more volume. But that being said, even the sole plate that's on the standard variation is going to have a wider toe box than pretty much anything else that's on the market. Now, the 442 stands out specifically for me because it's a great leather offering that retails for just $130. And personally, I went for the wide variation that I picked up last year, and I used these boots so much, and I can tell you from experience and trying on so many different boots, there is no mass market football boot that offers as much room in the toe box compared to the 442s that I have here. They just have such a casual and relaxed feel to them when you try them on. They're so comfortable, but you can also still get them really snug and aggressive with the lacing system just to make sure there's no slipping in the heel area. And another thing I like about the 442s is when you see them at first glance, they kind of just look like, your average traditional leather boots. You might think by looking at them that they're a little bit chunky, maybe a bit bulky or heavy, but that's actually not the case. Due to the really thin sole plate that they have on these boots, they're actually just as light as the Vapor 15. I think they're only a few grams heavier. So, these aren't gonna be like your grandfather's pair of leather football boots. They're a lot more modern than you might think. The only annoying thing that I experienced when breaking in the 442s is that I got a little bit of pain towards the back of the heel just because the heel liner is a little bit too thin and the back of this boot just tends to be a bit rigid. But thankfully, after about 3 to 4 sessions, that pain went away pretty much completely and they were really comfortable to play in. So if you're really struggling to find football boots that fit you and you haven't found anything that's wide enough, I would definitely recommend checking out the 442s, specifically in the wide variation if you can get it. And then next from New Balance, we have the Furon V7 Plus. Now the Furon is going to be the main speed boot offering from New Balance, so it's going to be competing with the likes of the Mercurial from Nike and the F50 from Adidas. And of those 3 different models, if you have wide feet, I would probably recommend you go with the Furons. I even think they're going to be a slightly better option compared to the F50 just because the sole plate on the Furons is going to offer you a little bit more width towards the front of the boot. The Furons are also going to bring an asymmetrical lacing system, which I do think is executed on a little bit better than we saw in the previous version of these boots, and it's going to offer a really clean striking surface. And then just underneath that lacing system, you're going to have a comfortable knit inner liner followed by a soft cushioned heel area. Then the sole plate you get with the Furon V7 is going to be really aggressive with these sharp bladed chevrons, so it's definitely only intended for use on firm ground natural grass. I was playing with these for a while on artificial grass, and I definitely thought the sole plate was just a little bit too aggressive for the surface. So New Balance, if you're listening, please make it a little bit easier to get an artificial grass variation of these boots. And then next up, with the final offering from New Balance, we have the Tequila V4 Plus. Now, of the 3 flagship models from New Balance, the Tequila might just be my favorite. I think these boots just do everything really well. They've got a soft synthetic upper that feels really premium without feeling plasticky at all. Then they've got a soft stretchy knit material that runs through the collar that feels flexible, but it's still firm enough to give you enough lockdown. Then I also really like the subtle textured elements on the side of the boots that just give you a little bit more grip on the ball. Then the Tequilas might also have one of the more innovative sole plates I've seen in years, with this cool pattern of having conical studs towards the center of the sole plate and the more aggressive bladed studs around the perimeter. And then even with the standard version, these are going to ship with a really wide, comfortable toe box, but if you feel like you need even more space, you can opt for that wide version. So if you're interested in trying out a New Balance boot for the first time, the $220 Tequila is a great place to start, and it's also going to be a little bit cheaper compared to the top end boots from other big brands. And guys, as an honorable mention before I ended the video, I wanted to shout out the Bio Cleats from Prevolve. Now these boots are a little bit different from all of the other ones on this list because they are going to be custom made. Basically, how the Bio Cleats work is that you do a 3D scan of your feet and then you send that scan over to the company and then they make a custom last based on your exact dimensions. Now these are extremely comfortable, really cool football boots, and the only downside to the process is that it is going to cost around $500, but keep in mind these are custom one-of-one football boots. So if you happen to have a bit more money to spend and you're really invested in getting boots that perfectly fit the shape of your feet, then I would recommend checking out Prevolve. And guys, finally, we have made it to the end of the video. And please feel free to let me know in the comments. I want to know the most comfortable pair of boots you've ever tried on. And if you have enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.